joining us for another class of Art for Kids. Today's lesson is World of Color. So we're going to be discussing the 3 primary colors, the 3 secondary colors, and the many tertiary colors that we can create with using just the 3 primary colors, which is blue, yellow, and red. So you see I have a palette here. I poured my watercolor paints into one of these little sections of the palettes and I kind of spread them out equally, and that's exactly how we're going to apply this paint to our color wheels. So some of the materials that you need first is this palette, some paints. You can also use crayons or color pencils if you don't have any paints with you. And you'll also need, very important, paper towel, a fresh cup of clean water, and a good, rather small paintbrush. The final objects that you'll need is a paper plate, a ruler, and a pencil. So I'm going to clear out my space, get my paper plate out, and I'm going to make a dot directly in the center. And I'm going to split this up using lines to create 6 different sections, kind of like a pizza pie, but with really big slices. There we go. So I'm going to number these now, drawing pretty lightly because we're going to paint over it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And now we can begin to mix our paints. So, actually, we're not going to mix our paints. We're going to apply our 3 primary colors directly onto the plate in equal sections. So, in section 1, I'm going to put my red. I'm going to get some water on my paintbrush, dab it off just a bit, get some of that water into the watercolor paint, and go ahead and apply. To get it nice and neat, I like to go toward the edges first. And it's looking like I'm gonna need a lot more paint, so. And watercolors dry relatively quickly. So you kind of want to be fast when you go through this process. And we want our watercolors to dry so they don't blend with the section that's gonna happen next to them. Great. The more layers you apply, the darker the color gets. And this is just the practice portion of this lesson. Once we're done with our color wheels, you will then apply these principles and tips to create your piece. So something really important to note is you want to get all that color off of your paintbrush when you're done with using that color. So if you can hear, I'm gently hitting the paintbrush at the bottom of the cup. Looks pretty good. Let's test it out on a paper towel. Good, no trace of red, so that means I can move on to my next color. So I'm gonna move all the way down to 3 to add, let's add yellow. Alrighty. And that yellow is really bright, so I'm not going to go over with the second layer. It looks great. Cleaning off my brush again. My water's getting kind of dirty. You can actually see evidence of a secondary color happening in my water cup because I just mixed the red leftover paint with the yellow leftover the paint, and you can kind of see already that there's a little bit of an orange happening there, and that's exactly what's going to go into my number 2 section. But let's finish with our primaries. Going over to space number 5, get some blue paint in there. And we see our primary colors on our paper plate here on our color mobile. If you see any white spots on your plate, you can go ahead and put water over your paintbrush and they'll fill in real quick. Okay, so now on to the mixing portion. Because I have a palette, I'm gonna mix directly on the palette. So for example, I'm gonna mix red and yellow. I'm gonna mix it in my palette right over here and then apply it to my paper plate. Another suggestion, if you don't have paper plates, you can use a piece of regular white cardstock paper or watercolor paper and use a template like a Tupperware or something, or a bowl to make the circular shape. It always helps when there's a circular shape for these color wheels. So I'm gonna go to my yellow first because that's a little bit more opaque than the red. And the second I put even the littlest bit of red in here, it's gonna take over. So I have to be really careful with the amount of red that I put in here. Same's gonna go for the yellow and the blue. It's gonna be a lot more of the yellow pigment than the blue. There we go. That's a good orange if I ever saw one. But I am gonna wanna add just a little bit more of that yellow. But leaving in mind that I'm gonna be using the yellow again, so I don't wanna use it all up. And the reason I'm not mixing directly in the color itself is because that color is gone. Once you contaminate it with another color, it automatically changes from that purest form. So here's my yellow. I'm gonna match my paper plate to bring it right in between. I'm sorry, here's my orange. This is orange, and it's actually looking super yellowy. So now's the moment to color correct and add a little bit of red. Sometimes when you add the color to the paper, it looks completely different than when it's in your palette. All right, that's looking a little better. Very good. All right, now we're gonna move on to yellow and blue. And that of course makes green. So like I said, I'm gonna take my yellow. We're not gonna be using it again because the next 2 colors to mix are red and blue. So I can really be generous with the amount of yellow that I use here because I don't wanna waste any paint. And making sure in between each time my paintbrush touches any color, I wipe it off in the cup. All right, just a little bit of blue. Start with a little bit and then we can always add more. That's pretty good. It's looking a little bluey green, but we can add a little more yellow in. Ah, that's beautiful. Okay, I'm holding my plate down with my finger in the white spot. Great. Okie dokie, now purple. That means a combination of red and blue. I'm going to start with a lot of red, add it in here, some blue, mix it up, see where we get. If it's looking too blue, I'm going to add some red. If it's looking too reddish, I'm going to add some blue. That's looking kind of bluey. So I'm gonna actually get the rest of my red and start over again, because that blue pigment just kind of takes over once you put it in there. All right, much better purple. Here I go. The perfect combination for a purple. It's the only one that breaks the rule a little bit. It actually works better with oils or acrylic paints, is red, blue with a little tiny dot of white. But there's no white in this color. This is just straight purple. Okay, here's our color wheel. I'm gonna let this dry. I also made one with colored pencils, drawing really lightly with colored pencils. So you'll see that here, not as vibrant as the one with the paints, but definitely achievable. You can also do this with crayon, just following the same principles, but coloring very lightly. All right, now our complementary colors are the colors that face directly opposite from one another. So we've got our primaries. Primaries are red, yellow, blue. And your secondaries are green, purple, orange. And your tertiaries are the colors that actually happen in between these colors. So if we had more, let's say, pizza slices, you'd see a red orange, or a yellow orange, or a blue green, or a blue violet. Complementary colors are those colors that are facing opposite of one another on the color wheel. All color wheels pretty much look like this. So your complementary colors are, let's say, red and green, orange, blue, yellow, and purple. My favorite is orange and blue. So the assignment, moving beyond this, is to create a painting of whatever you prefer, particularly a self-portrait, using only complementary colors. Now keep in mind, you can use a little violet blue and a little yellow orange if you choose the orange and blue, and vice versa. So you can kind of experiment a little bit on the outskirts of your complementary colors. And we would love to see what you come up with. So make sure you tag us at the Bass, MOA, or the Bass Creativity Center. Thanks so much for joining us this week. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. I hope you had fun, and I cannot wait to see what you do. Have a great week.